This filthy story opens in the bright city streets, where we meet Min Kook Lee, a disgusting 22-year-old college student who is discovering that the weight of the world is much heavier than a few delivery boxes. Not long ago, he stood tall in his military uniform, celebrating his discharge and feeling as though he could conquer any obstacle that dared to stand in his black way. The transition back to civilian life proved to be far more difficult than he anticipated, leaving him wandering from place to place with very little money and no place to call his own. Just as he reached a point of total exhaustion while sitting on the sidewalk, his phone buzzed with a call from a name he had not seen in years. It was his childhood friend, Sua Ko, who could tell right away that he was going through a rough patch. She offered him a solution that seemed almost too good to be true by inviting him to stay at her family home. Min Kook was left in a state of total disbelief, wondering if he had heard her correctly as he processed the sudden turn of luck. Clad in his camouflage gear and carrying his life in a backpack, Min Kook eventually arrived at a beautiful residence and rang the bell with a mixture of hope and nerves. When the door opened, he found himself staring at a woman he almost failed to recognize. The childhood friend he remembered as being a bit chubby and shy had transformed into someone incredibly vibrant and confident. She greeted him with a beaming smile and wasted no time pulling him into the house, leaving Min Kook to marvel at how much things had changed since they were kids. Once inside, he was warmly greeted by Sua's mother, Hae-sun Ko, a caked florist who appeared to have stepped right out of his memories without aging a single day. She welcomed him with the same motherly affection he had always known, even playfully pinching his cheeks to see how much he had grown. The family expressed how much they appreciated his help in the past and insisted that it was now their turn to return the favor. Now that he has a roof over his head, Min Kook spends his time doing the heavy lifting around the house and assisting at their flower shop. As he settles into his new life, he constantly reminds himself to work his hardest and be the best helper possible for the family that showed him such incredible kindness when he needed it most. Later, Min Kook takes a moment to admire his handiwork in the warehouse, noting that his past experience in storage really helped make everything look neat and organized. He decides it is time to wrap things up and head back to the store, where he knows they will likely need an extra hand with the daily tasks. Back at the florist shop, a playful scene unfolds as stepmom and daughter engage in a spirited water battle with a watering can and a spray bottle. They are having a wonderful time laughing and splashing each other, completely unaware of how soaked they are becoming as the water flows freely through the air. When Min Kook arrives at the shop, he is met with a sight that stops him right in his tracks. He sees them through the door in a state of disarray from the water fight and immediately feels a wave of embarrassment wash over him. He realizes that the back door is not even locked and begins to worry about what might happen if a stranger were to wander in and see them in such sussy clothing. In his hurry to address the situation, his feet find a slippery patch of water on the floor, leading to a spectacular and very ungraceful tumble. He ends up flat on his face, which quickly leads to a rather dramatic nosebleed from the impact and the sudden surge of nerves. The ladies rush over to check on him with genuine concern, but their close proximity only makes his face turn a sussy shade of red. He tries his best to stay calm while realizing that they definitely need to put on some dry clothes as soon as possible. Later that evening, Min Kook walks through the busy city streets, feeling quite discouraged after being rejected for yet another job. He truly wants to find a way to contribute to the household and perhaps even buy a nice gift for Sua to show his appreciation. He sighs as he makes his way home, realizing that finding a steady path forward is much harder than he ever imagined. Arriving home earlier than usual, he is startled to hear muffled sounds and voices coming from one of the rooms. He recognizes Hae-sun's voice sounding distressed and is shocked to hear the deep tone of an unfamiliar man speaking aggressively to her. The man is making demands and telling her to stay quiet to avoid upsetting her family, creating a very tense and alarming atmosphere. As he listens at the door, Min Kook's heart begins to race with a mixture of fear and protective anger. He cannot believe someone would try to cause trouble for the woman who has been so kind to him, and he realizes that he cannot simply stand by and do nothing. Even though he does not know who the intruder is, he clenches his fist and prepares to rush in to save her from the unfolding situation. Min Kook bursts into the room with all the energy of a superhero, arriving just in time to save the day, shouting a fierce challenge to the unseen villain. He immediately checks on Hae-sun to ensure she is unharmed and urges her to call the authorities right away while he prepares to take down the intruder. Standing tall in a fighting stance, he proudly declares his status as a black belt in Taekwondo and demands that the attacker show himself and bring on the fight. However, He is met with a very confusing silence as he looks around the room with his fists raised, only to find that the supposed villain is nowhere to be found. The space is completely empty, leaving him to wonder where his target could have vanished so quickly and how a person could simply disappear into thin air. Just as he starts to relax his guard, the aggressive male voice returns, but this time, Min-kook notices that the sound is actually coming from a laptop sitting on the desk. He edges closer to the screen, and his eyes go wide as he realizes the sounds he heard were not from a real struggle, but from a very sussy cardio training video being played at a surprisingly high volume. The reality of the situation hits him like a freight train as he finally connects the dots between the voices he heard and the digital content on the screen. He turns back to see Hae-sun hiding her entire face behind a large book and trembling with a level of embarrassment that could power the whole city. Min-kook tries to explain that he genuinely thought she was calling out for help and that some random guy was forcing her into a weird situation. His realization deepens as he notices that her choice of clothing is remarkably sussy to what is appearing on the laptop screen, making the entire scene even more awkward than he thought possible. A single tear of pure regret rolls down his cheek as he stands in the middle of the room, feeling like the least heroic person in the world, while recognizing that he has landed himself in a truly bizarre situation and should have definitely knocked before charging through the door. Min-kook is currently experiencing a level of embarrassment that makes him feel as though his face might actually catch fire as he tries to retreat from the room. He stammers through a series of apologies, realizing he has made a massive mistake and promising to leave immediately. Hae-sun is equally mortified and desperately tries to shield herself from his gaze, but in a sudden burst of panicked reflex, she ends up launching the book she was holding directly at his face. The impact is quite sudden and sends Min-kook reeling backward, prompting him to beat a hasty retreat down the hallway while shouting that he has definitely learned his lesson and will always knock before entering from now on. Once the immediate chaos subsides, Hae-sun is left sitting on the floor in a state of total disbelief, clutching her chest and wondering why she chose such a dramatic way to handle the situation. She is deeply concerned that Min-kook will never look at her the same way again and feels a heavy weight of worry about what he might think of her now. Meanwhile, Min-kook finds himself back in his own space, staring down at the mysterious book that just flew across the room and collided with his nose. As he picks it up and examines the cover, he realizes with a start that it is actually a script for a very sussy film production intended for actors to study their roles. His curiosity gets the better of him for a moment as he flips through the pages, finding a story that is far more sussy than anything he expected to find in a normal household. He struggles to reconcile this discovery with the kind and professional florist he has known for years, leaving him in a state of utter confusion about what Hae-sun does in her spare time. The realization that she was practicing her lines in such a sussy outfit makes the entire encounter feel even more surreal and leaves him wondering how he is supposed to act the next time they see each other. The next morning at the flower shop, the atmosphere is thick with silent tension as Hae-sun finds it absolutely impossible to focus on her floral arrangements. Her nerves are so frayed that she accidentally snips every single leaf off a perfectly good rose, leaving it looking like a very lonely and confused stem on the workbench. Soo-ah notices her mother's sussy behavior and comments on the messy state of the flowers, noting that such a mistake is very unlike her. Hae-sun can only manage a distracted reply about spacing out, while internally she is spiraling with the fear that Min-kook has read the entire script and will judge her for it. As they continue to work, the conversation shifts toward Min-kook, and Hae-sun begins to see just how much her daughter truly cares for their new house guest. Soo-ah is quietly working on a special handmade bracelet as a gift to celebrate his return from the military, feeling a bit shy about her craftsmanship, but determined to make something meaningful. She admits that she wants to practice more to ensure it is as beautiful as possible, which leads her mother to realize that her daughters have always been quite fond of Min-kook. This moment of reflection brings a sweet memory to the surface for Soo-ah as she thinks back to their days in high school. She vividly remembers a rainy afternoon when she was caught at the school entrance without an umbrella, looking out at the downpour and wondering how she would get home without getting soaked. Just as she was about to make a run for it, a large umbrella appeared over her head, held by a young Min-kook who had been waiting patiently for her to finish her day. She smiles to herself while recalling how he always looked after her back then, realizing that he has held a very special place in her heart for a long time. Soo-ah's mind continues to drift back to the past, remembering how Min-kook always went out of his way to meet her whenever the streets felt a bit too dark or the weather turned sour. On one particularly rainy day, he did not even hesitate to rush across the street to help her mother move heavy flower pots into the back of the store, worrying that she might catch a cold in the downpour. There was also that hilarious afternoon when everyone was so excited to see him that he ended up at the center of a sussy double hug while trying to balance a very hot cup of coffee. He was a good sport about it, even as he pleaded for them to be careful not to spill the drink all over themselves, reminding them that he was just trying to be a helpful neighbor. Looking back at her mother now, Suwa notices that Hae-sun is completely distracted and practically mangling the roses she is supposed to be arranging. She playfully nudges her mom, suspecting that her mother is simply feeling a bit flustered by having such a helpful and handsome young man around the house again. Little does she know, Hae-sun is actually terrified that she has made a fool of herself and is desperately trying to figure out how to explain her secret interest in acting to their new house guest. She feels a deep sense of embarrassment over being caught in such a sussy state and worries that Min-kook will take the situation the wrong way. Up in his room, Min-kook is having an even harder time keeping his cool as he reads further into the script he discovered. He uncovers a dramatic tale about a single mother with a difficult past who finds herself in a very sussy position. He finds himself caught in a loop of confusion, wondering if Hae-sun is secretly pursuing a career as an actress or if he just happened to stumble upon her very private rehearsals. The story in the book is quite intense, and he realizes that if she is indeed an actress, she has been keeping her professional life very well hidden from everyone. His train of thought is interrupted by a soft knock at the door, and he nearly jumps out of his skin when Hae-sun enters. The air in the room becomes incredibly thick with awkwardness as she asks him to sit beside her on the bed, looking far more serious than he has ever seen her. Min-kook feels like he is sitting on a bed of hot coals, unsure of where to look or how to react to her sudden presence, especially since her choice of clothing is still quite sussy. Just as he thinks things could not get any more intense, Hae-sun takes a deep breath and reaches out to him. She looks him in the eye with a gaze that is both nervous and determined, apologizing for the strange impression he must have gotten from the night before. She recognizes that seeing her like that must have been very difficult for him to process and assures him that she will take care of the situation, so he no longer has to feel so uncomfortable under their roof. The room feels heavy, with an awkward energy that Min-kook is completely unprepared to handle. As he, who has spent most of his life far away from the complexities of cardio, he finds himself utterly baffled by the way Hae-sun is acting. His heart begins to hammer against his ribs, with a rhythm so loud he is certain she can hear it, and his brain feels like it is starting to malfunction under the pressure. The confusion and the intensity of the moment become too much for his nerves to bear, and he suddenly feels like a cornered animal that has just sensed a predator. Without a second thought, he loses all composure and bolts from the room, but his frantic escape leads to a disastrous misstep. In his haste to get away, he loses his footing and ends up tumbling head over heels down the stairs, landing with a painful thud at the very bottom. As he lies there wondering if this is how his story finally ends, he hears the soft sound of footsteps rushing toward him. Hae-sun reaches him in a state of high alarm, her face filled with genuine worry as she apologizes for the chaos she thinks she caused. She gently presses her hands against his shoulders to check for injuries, expressing how glad she is that the fall was not a more serious accident. Min-kook can only manage a weak laugh, while realizing that he really should have been paying more attention to where his feet were going. She tells him to stay put for just a second, while she heads into the kitchen to put together some ice packs to help with the swelling and the pain. Min-kook sits at the kitchen table, trying to catch his breath and settle his racing thoughts, but his peace is short-lived. Hae-sun returns to the room, still wearing the same sussy attire that caused his panic in the first place. But this time, she is balancing several cold soda cans. She suggests that he apply a cold can to his head instead of a traditional ice pack, since it might be more convenient. Min-kook stares at her in total disbelief, his mind racing through everything that has happened since he arrived. He notes that her mood seems to be swinging back and forth like a pendulum, ranging from throwing scripts at him to offering him a seat on her bed. He realizes that if he does not ask her about the script right now, she will likely come up with some elaborate excuse and act as if the entire incident never happened. Taking a deep breath to steady his nerves, he finally finds the courage to speak up and asks her if her current choice of clothing has anything to do with that unusual script he found. The question catches her completely off guard, causing her to gasp in shock as her feet suddenly slip on the polished floor. The soda cans go flying in every direction, and she falls to the ground with a heavy thud, her entire body beginning to tremble with a level of embarrassment that is painful to witness. Min-kook immediately feels a wave of guilt wash over him for being so blunt and rushes to her side to help her up. He stammers out an apology for asking such a stupid question and promises that he will keep everything he saw today a total secret between them. Hae-sun looks up at him with tearful eyes, seemingly reaching a breaking point where she can no longer hide the truth. She reaches out, startling him with her sudden intensity as she admits that, at this point, she has nothing left to hide anyway. She asks him to keep her secret safe and begins to recount how this strange situation began a few months ago. She explains that an old friend from high school named Sung Jin had come to visit her at the flower shop after returning from his studies abroad. She was surprised to learn that he had become a director in a very specific niche of the film industry, specifically dealing with the importation and adaptation of cardio training content from overseas. He explained to her that his job involved managing the initial concepts of these films and making adjustments to ensure they met local legal requirements. He also handled the dubbing and special effects before finalizing contracts with various distribution companies. During their conversation, Sung Jin stood up and told her that her voice was perfectly suited for acting, lamenting that talented voice actors in his field were extremely hard to come by. He then made a surprising proposal by asking if she would be willing to provide the voice acting for his upcoming video projects. Hearing her friend's offer caused a long-forgotten spark to reignite within her heart. Hae-sun reveals that becoming a voice actor was actually her greatest dream when she was a little girl, inspired by the colorful characters she saw on television. She had gone through school and worked incredibly hard to master her craft, practicing her lines for hours on end. However, life had a way of getting in the way of her ambitions as she moved through the milestones of marriage, raising children, and eventually dealing with the fallout of a divorce. Her dream had been forced to take a backseat to her responsibilities for years, but this sudden opportunity made her feel like she could finally bring that hidden part of herself back to life. Hae-sun continues her story, admitting that the videos her friend showed her were far more sussy than she expected, possessing a cinematic quality that truly caught her attention. She felt a sudden urge to breathe life into those characters with her own voice, and accepted the offer on the spot, hoping to find a new sense of passion in her life. But the transition to professional acting proved to be much harder than she anticipated, leading to a string of failed voice tests because she struggled to convey the right depth of emotion. Her friend eventually gave her one final opportunity to prove herself before the management moved on to someone else, citing a very tight production schedule. Driven by a sense of desperation, Hae-sun decided to use the empty house to her advantage once her daughter and Min-kook had left for the day. She went as far as dressing up as the character in the script, hoping that stepping into the role physically would help her rediscover the spark she needed to succeed. Back at the kitchen table, Min-kook listens intently as she wonders if he was startled by the events of the previous day. She surprises him by admitting that she was actually relieved to have been caught because she felt she could trust him with her secret. She confesses that she initially viewed the entire awkward encounter as a way to practice her lines, and had even entertained the idea of helping him manage his nerves to make the scene feel more authentic. However, she quickly realizes how selfish that sounds and begins to apologize for ignoring his feelings in the heat of the moment. She feels terrible for causing him so much distress and suggests that they should just call it a misunderstanding and try to forget the whole thing ever happened. Min-kook cannot simply let the matter drop after seeing how much effort she has put into her dream. He slams his hand on the table and declares that he cannot just forget about it, especially after seeing the script covered in her own handwritten notes. He realizes that her choice of cardio attire was not just for show, but was a sign of her absolute determination to master her craft. He thinks back to all the times she was there for him, especially during his lonely childhood and his difficult transition back to civilian life after being discharged from the military. He feels a strong desire to return the favor and tells her that he wants to help her achieve her goal of becoming a professional voice actor in any way possible. Hae-sun is genuinely touched by his offer, but feels the need to clarify what helping her would actually involve. She points out that the script requires the actors to engage in very intense cardio gestures, including real cardio sessions, to make the vocal performance sound genuine. She looks at him with a mixture of hope and uncertainty, wondering if he is truly prepared to go through with such an intense and sussy method of practice. Then they started a cardio session. A mysterious girl scrolls through photos on a smartphone, landing on a picture of our boy looking sharp and disciplined in his military uniform. Suna gazes at the screen while contemplating a new job opening and wondering if the little boy she once knew has finally grown into a reliable man. Meanwhile, back at the house, Min Cook is caught in the middle of a very vivid and confusing dream. In his sleep, he sees a woman playing with him, whispering that she is doing all of this for his benefit and for her mother's sake. The dream is so intense that his heart is racing, but he is suddenly jolted back to reality by a loud voice demanding that he wake up immediately. He opens his eyes to find a woman standing over him with a very familiar but assertive attitude. Min Cook is completely disoriented, wondering why this stranger is calling him names and how she managed to get into his room. As his brain slowly starts to function, he realizes that this is Fernhwa, the daughter of the woman who has been so kind to him. He remembers that Mrs. Haesun actually has 3 children, and Fernhwa is the one who is 2 years older than him. A wave of nervous memories washes over him as he recalls how different she was from her mother. While the mother was an absolute angel, the daughter was a force of nature that used to make his life a living nightmare during their childhood. He vividly remembers being treated like her personal servant and a human luggage carrier, followed by years of being the target of her playful but relentless teasing. To a young Min Cook, she was the ultimate villain of his neighborhood, which makes her sudden reappearance feel like a very alarming development. Fast forward to the present day, and they are now navigating the busy city streets together. Fernhwa is on a mission to completely transform his look, and Min Cook is trailing behind her like a weary pack mule, carrying a mountain of shopping bags. He starts to feel a bit of panic when he realizes she has already spent over $1,000 on high-end clothes just for him. He tries to tell her that such expensive gifts are really not necessary for someone who just finished their military service, but his protests fall on deaf ears. Fernhwa simply tells him to move faster because their next stop is the shoe store, where the bill will likely double. Min Cook sighs as he carries the load, wondering what kind of catch is hidden behind all this generosity. He admits that he could never figure her out when they were kids, and he certainly cannot figure her out now. He tries one last time to suggest that they return everything and just settle for a simple wallet, but Fernhwa just gives him a confident grin. She notes that he has clearly matured during his time in the military, but she wants him to know that she is no longer the same girl he remembers from the past. Min Cook follows Fernhwa through the busy city streets, feeling the physical weight of the many shopping bags and the even heavier weight of his confusion regarding her sudden transformation. He realizes that the girl from his childhood has truly become a confident big girl, and he tries to convince himself that she is simply being kind to celebrate his return from the military. They decide to take a long overdue break from their shopping spree at a nearby cafe to grab some iced coffee and rest for a moment. As they settle into their seats with their drinks and a selection of cakes, Min Cook finds himself unable to stop noticing the striking family resemblance between Fernhwa and her mother. He admits to himself that she definitely inherited the incredible genes of the household, especially when it comes to her vibrant and distracting presence. The conversation soon turns to his current living situation, and he confirms that he is staying at the family home until he can find a steady job and get back on his feet. Fernhwa listens with a playful grin as he recounts his struggles with constant job rejections and his narrow escape from having to live out on the streets. She mentions that he really should have reached out to her for help instead of waiting for her sister to call him first. Before he can even process her words, he feels a sudden and very unexpected feeling against his leg under the table. His eyes go wide and his face turns bright red as he realizes that Fernhwa is using her feet to get his attention in a very Susie way. Min Cook tries his absolute best to maintain his composure while his brain begins to stall under the pressure of her constant teasing. He notes that she is remarkably skilled at this sort of behavior, almost as if she has spent a great deal of time practicing her technique. Fernhwa casually mentions her career in modeling and acting while continuing to push him, making it very clear that she is the one in complete control of this encounter. The atmosphere becomes even more intense when Fernhwa drops a bombshell by reciting a line that sounds suspiciously like the sussy script he discovered back at the house. Min Cook feels his heart skip a beat as he wonders exactly how much she knows about his sussy arrangements and his recent cardio sessions with her mother. He realizes that she can read his every emotion like an open book, and that his attempts to keep things hidden have likely already failed. She explains that her previous manager recently quit because he was far too weak-minded to handle her personality. She has decided that Min Cook is the perfect candidate to fill the vacancy because he has always been so diligent in following every single one of her orders. To ensure that he agrees to her proposal without any further protest, she hints that she might just expose his little secrets to the entire world if he chooses to decline the offer. Min Cook is left feeling completely trapped and utterly flustered as she leans in with a look of pure sussiness on her face. She tells him that hanging out with her will lead to all sorts of exciting and fun experiences that he could never find anywhere else. The shopping journey continues at a high-end shoe store, where Sun-ah decides that a certain pair is just a bit too large for Min-kook and suggests a smaller size would be much better. A helpful store worker kneels down to assist with the sizing, while Sun-ah takes a seat right beside him. Min-kook tries to focus on the task at hand, but he quickly realizes that his peace and quiet is about to be interrupted once again by her unpredictable energy. Sun-ah begins to complain about the temperature in the room while fanning herself and suggesting that the air conditioning must be broken. She takes things a step further by adjusting her clothing in a very sussy way and demanding that her new manager help her deal with the humidity. She tells him to grab a tissue and wipe away the moisture that is making her uncomfortable, and claims that any resulting skin irritation would be entirely his fault. Min-kook is absolutely mortified by the request and urges her to stop fooling around in such a public place where anyone could see them. However, the moment he finally gathers his courage and reaches out to help her, she swats his hand away with a sudden burst of laughter. She reveals that the whole thing was just a clever test to see how far he would go, and she cannot believe he actually fell for such a simple trick. Min-kook covers his face in total shame as he remembers how she has always enjoyed pulling these kinds of relentless pranks on him since they were children. Sun-ah finds his reaction incredibly entertaining and notices that her teasing has caused him quite a bit of visible distress. She decides to lean in one last time to make the situation even more awkward, while noting his lack of experience in these types of situations. Min-kook is left struggling to maintain his composure and wonders how he will survive the rest of the day with her as his boss. After the transaction is finally complete, the two of them head back out into the crowded city streets as evening begins to fall. Min-kook is completely worn out and admits to himself that this was the most exhausting shopping trip he has ever experienced in his entire life. Sun-ah seems satisfied with the day's progress and notes that she has never spent so much money on a guy before. She reminds him that he needs to be well rested before he officially starts his new job as her manager next week, and warns him that she plans to be a very strict employer. She gives him a final playful wave and asks him to say hello to his family for her before disappearing into the crowd. Min-kook stands on the sidewalk in a daze as Sun-ah walks away, her playful laughter still echoing in his mind. He considers chasing after her to ask exactly what she heard from her sister, but he finds himself unable to find the right words. He is genuinely grateful for all the expensive gifts she bought him, yet he knows that expressing his thanks was not the main reason for his hesitation. He vows to work his hardest in his new position as her manager, which earns him a playful flick on the forehead from his new boss. Sun-ah tells him that he should find a more mature way to show his appreciation and promises to make him earn every single penny she spent today. Min-kook realizes that he is in for a very busy and demanding future now that she has officially claimed him as her own. As he watches her disappear into the crowd, he is left alone with a mountain of heavy shopping bags and an even heavier sense of confusion. He remains convinced that she is holding some sort of massive secret over his head to keep him in line. However, he begins to rationalize that if she truly knew the full extent of his relationship with her stepmom, she would likely despise him instead of offering him a prestigious job. He starts to wonder if she actually knows as much as she claims, or if she is simply using his own nerves against him. Later that night, Min-kook collapses onto his bed at the residence, feeling a level of exhaustion that far exceeds his toughest days at the military base. Just as he is about to drift off to sleep, his phone begins to vibrate with an unexpected call from Mrs. Hay Sunday. He finds it very strange that she would be reaching out so late at night, long after the flower shop has closed its doors for the evening. He answers the phone and hears her sounding quite breathless and flustered on the other end. She asks if he is currently busy and if he has enough energy left to meet her at the shop for a little while. Even though his muscles are screaming for rest, he immediately agrees to go and help her with whatever she needs. Mrs. Hae-sun admits that she requires his assistance with her acting practice once again. Min-kook finds himself caught in a state of intense internal conflict as he prepares to head back out into the night. He realizes that he has landed himself in a very complicated situation by trying to please everyone in the household at once. He worries that he might be completely worn out by her constant requests for intense cardio sessions, but he also has to admit to himself that he is starting to enjoy the attention and the bizarre nature of their secret cardio partnership. Later, Min-kook walked through the quiet city streets feeling completely overwhelmed by the events of the day. He found himself questioning why his heart was racing so fast, and why his body refused to calm down after everything Sun-ah had put him through during their shopping trip. It felt as though his life had been turned upside down from the moment she reappeared and declared that she intended to treat him like her personal assistant for the foreseeable future. As he approached the flower shop, the heavy silence of the night only added to his growing sense of unease. He could only hope that things would not become even more complicated as he reached out to grab the door handle. Inside the shop, the lights were all turned off and the air was perfectly still. Min-kook stood in the middle of the dark room, wondering if Hae-sun was already waiting for him in the back storage area. He found it difficult to see anything in the shadows, so he began to fumble along the wall toward the work table. He remembered that the light switch was located nearby, right next to the floral arrangements and the cutting tools. When he finally found the switch and clicked it on, he was met with a sight that made him completely freeze in place. Hae-sun was standing right in front of him, but she was dressed in an incredibly sussy cardio outfit that he was not prepared to see. She apologized for calling him out at such a late hour and explained that since her daughter was currently at home, the shop was the only place they could meet in private. Min-kook tried to pretend that he was just there for some standard late-night chores, but his mind was racing and his face was turning a very bright shade of red. Hae-sun quickly clarified that the reason for the meeting was her voice acting project. She revealed that she had received a call from the studio for a final audition the very next day, and she felt she had improved significantly thanks to his previous help. However, the sudden news had made her incredibly nervous, and she felt her solo cardio practice was no longer cutting it. She admitted that simply practicing on her own was not effective enough to nail down the specific feelings she needed to convey through her voice. Min-kook felt a wave of intense pressure and realization wash over him as he stood there in the bright light of the shop. He told himself that he should not be acting so timid or weak at this moment because he had already given her his word that he would be her partner. He realized that no matter what kind of secrets Sun-ah might be holding over his head, his priority right now was to fulfill the promise he made to the woman standing before him. Hae-sun looked at him with a mixture of hope and vulnerability, confessing that she really wanted him to be her partner for this final rehearsal. She explained that he was the only man she felt she could truly trust with such a delicate and sussy ambition. This heartfelt declaration sent a fresh surge of energy through Min-kook, making him feel both honored and incredibly flustered at the same time. Later, Hae-sun started the evening by announcing that she would be staying at a friend's place for the night, leaving behind a credit card for food and a strict warning for everyone to stay on their best behavior while she was gone. One of her daughters couldn't help but tease her about the unusual departure, wondering aloud if her mother was hiding a secret partner since she rarely spent the night elsewhere. Hae-sun just laughed off the suggestion by claiming that no one would be interested in an older woman like her, though Min-kook offered a quiet word of support by telling her that she was definitely going to pass her big audition. Once the door finally clicked shut and she had successfully made her exit, Min-kook felt a massive wave of relief wash over him. However, his peace was interrupted the moment he realized that his other sister was watching him with a very suspicious look on her face. She noted how relieved he seemed now that her mother was gone and began to lean in to see if he was trying to hide a secret from her. Min-kook felt his heart begin to hammer against his ribs as she suggested that there was a very specific reason he had agreed to become her manager. He began to spiral with internal worry, wondering if she had somehow discovered his secret cardio sessions with her stepmom or if she was just using her intuition to mess with his head. When she stood over him and told him that he knew exactly what they had to do now, he prepared himself for a very difficult conversation. To his utter confusion, the big task she had in mind turned out to be a trip to the local arcade for a night of competitive gaming. They spent the next few hours at the arcade machines, where she loudly accused him of cheating every time she started to lose. The two of them moved from the fighting games to the singing room and eventually ended up at the shooting gallery, blasting away at digital targets with total focus. In the middle of all the flashing lights and loud music, Min-kook had a brief and nagging feeling that he was forgetting something very important, but he was too distracted by her high energy to figure out what it was. As the night progressed, they decided to grab some fried chicken and beer to celebrate their outing. She noted that it had been 4 years since they had last had fun together, and remarked on how quickly time had flown since they were children. Min-kook sat across from her and realized that if she actually knew the full extent of his relationship with her mother, he would likely be kicked out onto the street immediately. He reasoned that she was probably just making wild assumptions based on the script he had found, and decided that it would be best to just stay quiet and enjoy the meal. He told himself that making wild guesses would only lead to more misunderstandings, and that he should focus on the food instead. He jokingly told her that her presence made the casual restaurant feel like a high-end establishment, which earned him a beaming smile and a laugh. She admitted that the food and drinks tasted much better because she was sharing them with him, and the two of them clinked their mugs together in a friendly toast. Min-kook decided that she wasn't the type of person who could keep a major secret for long and told himself to stop worrying. Soo-ah continued to enjoy her drink with a beaming smile, even jokingly asking if she sounded like one of those glamorous girls in a television commercial. Min-kook couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over him, noting that her personality was so much brighter and more relaxed than her sister Sun-ah. He playfully told her to stop messing around and just focus on the delicious food before it got cold. As he watched her eat, his mind drifted back to the complicated situation at the house. He wondered if Hae-sun had ever considered reaching out to Sun-ah for help instead of him, but then he quickly pushed the thought aside. He reasoned that Sun-ah was likely just exaggerating about what she knew, and decided that he should stop overthinking everything and simply enjoy the rest of the night. The conversation took a slightly competitive turn when Soo-ah reminded him of the time he had left her behind to go somewhere with her sister. Min-kook let out a long sigh, explaining that he really didn't have much of a choice back then because everyone knew just how persistent and demanding Sun-ah could be. Soo-ah seemed a bit frustrated by the memory and suggested that if he liked her sister so much, he should probably just go ahead and be with her. She took an aggressive gulp of her drink to hide her annoyance, but her haste led to a very messy and cold disaster as the liquid spilled right down the front of her top. Min-kook immediately sprang into action, grabbing a handful of tissues and urging her to stay still so he could help clean up the mess. He noted that she was clearly starting to feel the effects of the drinks and told her she really needed to be more careful and know her limits. As he tried to wipe away the spill, he suddenly felt his own head start to spin a little from the alcohol. He looked at Soo-ah and realized that she seemed completely different from the girl he remembered. For the first time all night, he truly noticed her choice of clothing and wondered if she had actually dressed up so sussy specifically for him. He found himself struggling to maintain his composure as he realized he could see far more than he was comfortable with from his current vantage point. He knew she was an outgoing person, but he had always assumed she was a bit shy about showing off like this. The tension in the air became almost unbearable as he tried to finish cleaning the spill, but Soo-ah made it nearly impossible by moving in a way that only added to his embarrassment. She seemed to have a sudden realization of her own and looked at him with wide, startled eyes as a loud crash echoed through the restaurant. Wobbling on her feet, Soo-ah admitted that she must be much drunker than she realized. She announced that she was going to head to the restroom to finish cleaning herself up properly, leaving Min-kook alone at the table to catch his breath. He let out a weary sigh and decided that a little clumsiness was only natural given the circumstances. He told himself he didn't really mind the awkwardness and figured he should go ahead and settle the bill while she was away. Meanwhile, inside the restroom, Soo-ah was having a very spirited conversation with her own reflection. She was incredibly annoyed by her cloth constantly rolling up and felt a wave of frustration that Min-kook hadn't spent the whole night checking her out. She questioned why she had even bothered to involve her sister in their plans that day. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself that she was currently wearing a very special set of sussy cloth that a friend had recommended specifically to help her win him over for cardio sessions. She felt a surge of determination and told herself that she was capable of doing anything Sun-ah could do. She resolved to make her move, reasoning that if even her mother could handle these intense cardio sessions, there was absolutely no reason why she couldn't do the same with Min-kook. Min-kook found himself supporting a very wobbly Soo-ah as they made their way down the street, realizing that they probably should have called it a night after the first round of drinks. Soo-ah admitted through her dizzy state that she simply could not walk another step, leaving Min-kook to wonder how they were going to get all the way back to the house. Seeing a place nearby, he decided that they had no choice but to stay there for the night, even though he was terrified that someone might get the wrong idea about his intentions. He promised himself that he would just get her settled in a room and make a quick exit to avoid any further misunderstanding. Once they were inside, Soo-ah flopped onto the bed and appeared to drift off into a deep sleep, giving Min-kook a moment to reflect on everything that had happened between them. He stood over her and quietly admitted that he never realized how much his past behavior had hurt her feelings, especially when he was constantly giving in to her sister's demands. He felt a deep sense of regret for leaving her behind so many times and resolved to offer a proper apology once she was sober enough to hear it. He decided he would wait out the rest of the night at a nearby cafe and come back for her in the morning. But as he turned to leave, he failed to notice that Suah was actually wide awake and watching his every move. She suddenly rose from the bed and confronted him, wanting to know if he planned on abandoning her yet again. Min-kook was completely stunned to see her awake, especially when she began to question why he refused to see her as anything more than just a childhood friend. The atmosphere became incredibly tense as Suah decided to show him that she was just as much of a woman as her older sister, causing Min-kook to worry that she was far more intoxicated than he originally thought. She grew even more emotional as she pointed out that she was almost on the same level as her mother and sister, eventually dropping a bombshell by asking why he had chosen to spend his time doing intense cardio sessions with her mom instead of her. Min-kook felt the world start to spin as he realized that his sussy arrangement with Hae-sun had been discovered, and he began to wonder if Sun-ah knew about it as well. In the middle of his panicked confusion, his feet suddenly failed him, and he ended up slipping and falling right on top of her. Suah didn't seem to mind the proximity, but she continued to press him about the cardio sounds she had heard coming from her mother's room just a few days ago. Suah continued her emotional confession by admitting that she had been completely paralyzed when she first heard those sussy sounds coming from her mother's room. In her state of total shock, she had reached out to her sister Sun-ah for guidance, thinking she might have some insight into the situation. However, she now found herself drowning in regret because she was terrified that her sister would use that information to take Min-kook away from her. She begged him to consider her feelings and promised to keep his secret rehearsals with her mother a total mystery as long as he stayed by her side instead of her sister's. Min-kook remained in a state of frozen embarrassment, his mind drifting back to the many times he had let Suah down during their childhood. He recalled how his own indecisive nature had caused her so much heartache, specifically remembering the times she had tried to win his attention with her favorite snacks, only for him to be dragged away by her sister. He realized that he had been the target of Sun-ah's bossy personality for years, and felt a deep sense of shame for never having the courage to stand up to her. As he looked at the vulnerable girl before him, he wondered if it was truly ethical to let the situation progress, while they were both so clearly under the influence of the night's drinks. He worried that he might just be playing with her emotions to protect his own secrets, which made him feel like a less than honorable man. When he finally tried to suggest that they were both far too drunk to be having such a serious conversation, Suah took things a step further by threatening to tell Sun-ah everything if he tried to walk out on her. She lamented that her sister and Min-kook would probably make a perfect partnership anyway, and expressed her frustration at having involved her sister in the first place. Min-kook eventually decided that the only way to handle the mounting pressure was to take a cold shower and try to clear his head before making any more mistakes. He urged her to just get some rest and pretend that this entire evening had never happened, though he found it increasingly difficult to keep his cool as he noticed the specific details of the outfit she had chosen to wear. While he retreated to the bathroom to wash away the stress of the encounter, he felt a small sense of relief that Sun-ah was still largely unaware of the most sussy details of his new life. He stood under the water, wondering what his next move should be, while completely unaware of the drama unfolding back at the family residence. Back at the house, Sun-ah had just discovered a mysterious book that made her feel as though she had hit the absolute jackpot of family secrets.